Hi, welcome to Author Groupie. My name is DM Barr, and I am the author of such psychological thrillers as Expired Listings, Slashing Mona Lisa, and the upcoming Saving Grace, a psychological thriller, which is now on pre-sale at Amazon. So head on over and order it, please, please, please. I am speaking today with Ted Huntington, who is a very interesting gentleman. He is living off in Colorado, an ex-New Yorker who has invented a supernatural superhero named Doug Maxwell, and he has created a whole world around him with Facebook groups and also author networking groups that you might want to take advantage of. He did want me to add something that he left out of the interview, and that is that if you as an author would like him to read the first chapter of your book and put that on various Facebook groups to be heard, because perhaps you don't like reading your own work, he will do that for you. Just join the Doug Maxwell group on Facebook and shoot him a note, and you can take it from there. So sit back, enjoy the interview, and as always, stay safe. Welcome to another edition of Author Groupie. I'm here with Ted Huntington, who has made his return to the literary world with the unveiling of Doug Maxwell, a new kind of supernatural superhero for the real world. So we're going to find out what that means. Huntington has had a successful business career, holding several marketing executive positions in insurance and financial services worlds. However, he has never lost his passion to create unforgettable fictional characters. His first novel, the young adult science fiction adventure Blast Off to ECAPS, originally was published in 2007 and told the tale of a 12-year-old genius whisked to a planet in a far-off galaxy that is the mirror image of Earth. And then you followed it up with the sequel Blast Off to Earth. He is currently developing a follow-up to Doug Maxwell about another unique supernatural superhero. You can't have too many. And he is working on a screenplay adaptation for Doug Maxwell, so we should ask you about that. The New York native currently resides in Colorado.
Definitely.
And you enjoy your Les Paul guitars, your fur babies, cats or dogs?
I have 4 dogs and 1 cat.
Good for you.
4 dogs and 1 cat.
Very good. And he loves spending time with his human children, Katie, TJ, and Jenna, who he calls his greatest creation, as well as his new baby grandson, Chance. So welcome to Author Groupie.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's great to have you. I have lots of questions for you, starting off with, you created Doug Maxwell, who you call this supernatural superhero for the real world. Can you explain that? Exactly who or what is Doug Maxwell?
Well, you know, I spent many years watching all these Marvel superhero movies based on the comics, and they're all entertaining. They're all great. But then it kind of dawned on me, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, that they're all kind of basically the same, right? Maybe they're in a different costume, but they're all fighting some international or intergalactic criminal, or it's something out of this world type of scenario. I thought, what if we took a superhero and put that superhero in more of a natural setting? And what better natural setting for a superhero than the sports world? So then I started putting together this concept in my brain. It actually took a couple of years to formulate the whole thing of, what if a superhero was playing in the National Football League or playing Major League Baseball? What kind of obstacles would he encounter? What kind of opposition? Nobody would believe him, right? He'd be so good, he would have to fake it and actually play down to a certain level in order to just be believable. So that's kind of how the whole Doug Maxwell premise came about.
Great. So what parts of you are in Doug Maxwell?
None. Actually, I love sports. I've always loved sports. However, I would also say that maybe any boy that has enjoyed sports, enjoyed playing sports, has harbored this fantasy of being this incredible athlete. So, maybe just that seed of that fantasy of what if I was such an incredible athlete, and how would I be in the National Football League or Major League Baseball? Or Doug Maxwell also wrestles. So in high school, he's a 3-sport star. So maybe there's that little seed of, what if I was such an incredible athlete? Wouldn't that be great? And I guess that's probably the same as 90% of all boys that like sports in the world.
Well, what made you want to write the book? Just to see that fantasy could come true?
To see that, right, to see that fantasy come true. I actually wrestled with the idea of, should it be a novel or should it be a screenplay? I've written some screenplays in the past, and I thought this would really bode well for the big screen. But quite honestly, I think I'm a little better at writing a novel, at creating the book. So that's how it turned into a novel. And interestingly enough, one of the first readers of the initial manuscript took my manuscript to a couple friends, and they passed it along. And long story short, I had a movie studio ask me for a screenplay adaptation of the book before the book was even published.
Wow, that's
So
amazing.
that's in the process as well, creating a screenplay adaptation of Doug Maxwell.
That's amazing. Wow. Hold on just one sec. What are the important messages you think the book imparts to readers?
First and foremost, find your destiny. It's the message that threads throughout the entire book. Doug Maxwell has to find his true destiny. And interestingly enough, being a great athlete may not be Doug's great destiny.
Interesting. So I saw in Amazon that it was under a couple of very different categories, from sports romance to supernatural or paranormal. So I'm wondering if the cross-genre nature of the book enhanced or hurt finding an audience. Like, who is your typical Doug Maxwellian?
It's interesting. I have some Facebook groups, and I have a Doug Maxwell Facebook group that helps to promote the book. And I would say most of the fans in the Doug Maxwell group are sports fans. However, I think going to like Amazon, it has more of a science fiction fan base than anything. I thought it would be neat, and I think it's kind of a growing trend to combine different genres. And yes, there's definitely the science fiction element to it, because there is this mystical, supernatural thing that happens to Doug that morphs him into a superhero. And then that, of course, kind of haunts him in a way throughout the entire story. But yes, it's definitely a sports book. He's the biggest superstar in the world. And then another theme throughout the entire book is he's looking for love. He's looking for somebody to love and support him throughout his entire life as well. So that's where that romance comes in.
I'm a big proponent of mixed genre. I can't write in one genre to save my life. So it sounds like a book I'd really enjoy.
Well, good.
Yeah. Well, how is writing YA different than writing for adults, since it sounds like this new book is more bent for adults?
With an adult type theme, or at least like not a young adult theme, I think you could be more honest with real life type of scenarios. Doug has a dark side to him, this storm that changes his entire life also implants a dark side into his world. And I could explore a lot more of that with a more general type of genre than with young adult. When I started writing my first book, Blast Off to ECAPS, the initial idea was to make it a children's book, because this is kind of an interesting side note. I initially wrote Blast Off to ECAPS when I was 8 years old.
Really?
I was in second grade, and my teacher came up to me and said, the principal is allowing the school, our class, to put on a play, and she thought it would be a great idea if the class wrote the play. So she tapped me as the head writer, and every day we would go back to the back of the class and we would spend 30 minutes and we wrote this play that we ended up performing called Blast Off to ECAPS. So fast forward, I don't know, 30 some odd years after that, I decided to write a book, and I thought I'll make this a children's book. I'll make Blast Off to ECAPS a children's book, but I found I couldn't write a children's book. I couldn't get in that mindset. Probably the youngest mindset I could get my brain into is a 12-year-old. So that's where the young adult came from.
Fair enough. So Doug Maxwell is self-published. What do you think are the benefits and the challenges of self-publishing?
The challenges are sales. It's a constant process, constantly trying new things to market it. I've got a marketing background. I've been a marketing executive for 30 years. I still have a marketing consulting business, but marketing and selling books is a whole other world. And it takes a lot of effort and a lot of networking in order to get those sales numbers up. The benefit is I can do what I want in order to market it. I'm not tied to a publisher. Although I will say I've got a publisher right now that wants to republish Doug Maxwell.
Really?
And do their own marketing for it. So I'm all for that. I've spent the last few months working very hard to market Doug Maxwell, and I now have a publisher that is in the process of republishing it for me.
That's very unusual. So you must have had some great sales, because that just doesn't happen very often.
I had some good networking, and it was actually somebody from one of my Facebook groups that recommended me to this publisher.
That's fabulous. Now, I do know you have the background in marketing, and I saw the Facebook group, which is a great idea to expose, to increase exposure. Can you tell me a little bit about that aspect of author marketing? What's involved in creating the group and how you attract people to it, and how it's been successful for you, other than getting you a publisher?
Well, that's the big thing. Really,
deal.
That's the overall goal is, sales, trying to help generate some enthusiasm for the book. I've got one group, that's the Doug Maxwell group, and that's a fun group. It started out being a sales ploy for the book, but it turned into, I had a lot of my personal friends that joined it. A lot of them have bought the book, and they've offered a lot of comments on the book, but it's just turned into a fun networking thing. And then I subtly put in some sales tactics. I've done some contests. I've done, most recently, I bought a whole bunch of books, and I've offered to sell autographed copies of the books. And that's been very popular, selling autographed copies of the books. On another group that I started called Authors Networking Group, the objective is to support each other. I've only been running these groups for a couple of months, and Authors Networking Group already has well over 300 members, and we're supporting each other. We're helping to promote our work. I ask everybody in the group to look at the works from the other members and buy from each other, promote. There's a lot of author support companies that are part of the group as well. So artists, graphic artists, people that review books, editors, all sorts of author support services are in that as well. So that has helped as well. And then from there, like I said, I got somebody that kind of likes what I'm doing and has read the book and thought, you know what, I'm going to endorse you to my publisher.
That's so great. So I noticed something you did that was interesting in one of those groups. You created watch parties for various chapters. So were you releasing
Right.
the book chapter by chapter? And then, what was the watch party? What was that all about?
It was to generate enthusiasm in the book.
So did you just read from it, or what were you doing?
I would read a chapter at a time. There was one really long chapter. It's about 20 pages long that I think I split up into about 4 different readings. But after a while, I didn't want to read the entire book. I started having some of the members of the Facebook group asking me to just keep reading the entire book. And they said, "Oh, we like that better than actually reading the book." I said, "No, I want you to buy the book." I'm sorry. I'm glad you like my reading. I'm glad you like the way I read, but I want you to buy the book. So I've kind of slowed down on those watch parties a little bit because I want people to buy the book.
Fair enough. So how much time do you devote to writing now, and what are you writing next other than the screenplay?
I try to spend at least a couple hours a day writing. My philosophy in writing is that I want to have at least a success every day. So sometimes it's just not there. You just don't feel it. And my success might be editing what I wrote the day before, or jotting down some notes for future chapters. But I do try and spend at least 2 hours a day in writing. As far as what I'm writing now, in addition to working on the screenplay adaptation, I'm writing a sequel to Doug Maxwell. The working title right now is called Charlie Estrella. It is about a supernatural musical superstar who is impacted by a mystical storm that changes him and morphs him into the world's greatest guitarist.
Wonderful. And that ties into your Les Paul guitar?
Yes. Exactly.
What kind of music do you play on that guitar? What are your favorite things to play?
I'm more of a classic rock guy. So, if I can plink out a Led Zeppelin tune or two. I'm not a good guitarist, but I enjoy it.
Very cool. So would you like to read a few pages from Doug Maxwell for our viewers?
Sure, I'd love to.
With the idea that they should buy the book. He's not going to read the whole
buy
thing.
the book. This is not, it's 440 pages, so I'm not going to read the whole thing on my watch parties. So if you don't mind, the first chapter is 5 pages. It takes about 10 minutes to get through it. So you could edit however you wish.
Okay,
is that okay?
Have at it.
All right. Overtime, chapter 1, Doug Maxwell. The crowd was in an uncontrollable frenzy. The TV audience could barely hear the broadcasters over the insanity that echoed through the stadium. The Giants' first overtime possession of the Super Bowl stalled at their own 48-yard line, and their punting team jogged onto the field. The drama had been building ever since halftime when the Jets' Doug Maxwell emerged from the tunnel. The best player in the league for the past 4 seasons, maybe the best athlete to ever play professional sports, was knocked senseless from the game early in the first quarter on a dirty hit from the Giants' Willie Williams, who was immediately ejected from the game for the flagrant foul. Without their two-way superstar, who typically dominated both the offensive and defensive sides of the ball, the Jets were listless and went into halftime trailing 27-3. The medical team carted Maxwell off the field on a stretcher to a chorus of boos and cheers, the boos directed at Williams. They immediately administered the concussion protocol in the locker room. The hit was brutal and inexcusable. Maxwell had plowed up the middle for a tough 9-yard run. It took 4 Giants defenders to drag him to the ground. The whistle blew the play dead, and as Maxwell started to get to his feet, Williams came soaring through the air like a missile, his helmet aimed squarely at Maxwell's dome. The violent helmet-to-helmet collision sent Maxwell sinking to the turf. Williams, too, was woozy, but was able to stand, and the crowd rained down a massive wave of jeers, tossing cups of beer and spitting at Williams while he was escorted off the field. No one expected Maxwell to return to the game. After the first half, dominated by the Giants, no one thought the Jets would have any chance to come back, especially without their injured star. During halftime, the announcer speculated about the senseless play. Former quarterback turned broadcaster Phil Ramsey noted, "I'm going to state the obvious. Willie Williams' career is over. He's going to get a hefty fine and a lengthy suspension. I'd look for the Giants to cut him from the team before the Lombardi Trophy is awarded after this game." Longtime play-by-play expert Jimmy Seals added, We're all in agreement there, Phil. The bigger question is, how is Doug Maxwell? The team has been mum on the results of his concussion test and CAT scan. I cannot imagine anyone returning from a hit like that. But then again, this is no ordinary athlete. Maxwell was the last player back onto the field following the halftime festivities. He trotted out slowly, holding his helmet under one arm, his curly brown locks bouncing and his muscles rippling through his uniform and pads. He had a menacing, steely stare that meant bad news for the Giants. His eyes were clear and laser focused, no foggy gaze at all that one would expect after such a massive blow to the head. Every Giants player looked up at the huge high-def screen that showed Maxwell returning to the playing field. A defeated look poured over the team. The crowd that was nearly lulled to sleep during the lopsided first half rose to their feet in unison, cheering frantically for Doug Maxwell. Many Giants fans instantly became Jets fans at that moment. Giants coaches tried valiantly to rally the troops. We're up 27-3, fellas. No one player can possibly lead a team back from that. No way in hell. Jets fans, really every football fan in the nation, knew that if any player could return from a hit like that, it was Doug Maxwell. The Jets received the second half kickoff, and after a touchback, started at their own 25. Maxwell was still on the bench for the first two plays, which were incomplete passes. Maybe Maxwell is just a decoy. You came out this half for inspiration, Ramsey commented. After a false start penalty pushed the Jets back to their own 20, Doug Maxwell entered the game. I don't believe what we're seeing, Ramsey said. The stadium erupted. The team could not hear Jets quarterback Nick Miller's signals, and Miller took a timeout before the play clock expired. I've never heard a crowd this loud, Jimmy. Throughout the timeout, the noise was deafening. Maxwell, Maxwell, Maxwell. The next play call was brilliant. At 3rd and 15, the defense expected a pass and sent a mad dog blitz at Miller. Maxwell lunged toward the linebacker, pretending to chip block. Instead, Maxwell let the defender rush past him, and Maxwell slid out into the flat. Miller tossed a perfectly executed screen pass to Maxwell, who raced through the defense, making a quick cut at midfield and crossing the goal line after a spectacular 80-yard touchdown. After the extra point, the Jets were still down 27-10, but momentum had completely shifted in favor of the Jets. Maxwell and the Jets dominated the second half. Maxwell, also the team's middle linebacker, recorded 11 tackles during the half and forced a fumble. He completely clogged the middle of the field and disrupted the Giants' offensive game plan. Back on offense, the league's first back to rush for 2,500 yards in a season was nearly unstoppable. Maxwell scored 3 touchdowns and ran for a Super Bowl record 256 yards. As time expired in regulation play, the teams were tied 30-all and headed to overtime. During the break before overtime, League Commissioner John Heller stopped by the broadcast booth for an interview with Phil Ramsey and Jimmy Seals. Commissioner Heller had raised eyebrows when he ordered weekly random drug tests for Heller. Heller proclaimed that he had the authority to mandate extensive drug tests beyond what the league's agreement with the Players Association allowed if the commissioner believed a player was violating the substance abuse policy. The move led to a lawsuit from the Players Association and created a massive rift between Maxwell and Heller. Commissioner Heller, thank you for joining us. Seals started the interview. You couldn't ask for a more exciting Super Bowl. No, we couldn't have scripted it better ourselves. 2 New York teams playing against each other for the first time in the Super Bowl, the league MVP coming back from injury, and now overtime. Ramsey interjected. About Maxwell's injury, what do you expect will happen to Willie Williams? Well, he was ejected from the game, so that usually results in some sort of fine. I can't comment beyond that. I'm sure the league will look at the play closely to determine how flagrant the foul was. Seals followed up. Commissioner, come on, sir. We all saw the hit replayed in slow motion about a dozen times. All due respect, is there really a question about his intent to injure Doug Maxwell? The Jets players watched the interview from their locker room. All eyes turned to Maxwell after the commissioner's comments. Maxwell shook his head in disgust. I'll stop there.
Very good. And I heard the dog liked it too.
I think you froze on me.
I said I heard the dog barking.
One of them, yeah.
No, it sounds very exciting, although I think that it is a fantasy.
Yeah,
it's a fantasy that Giants fans would ever become Jets fans. I speak as a New Yorker.
It might be a fantasy that the Jets played in 4 straight Super Bowls.
Yeah. Well,
or even one.
Right. Well, one can dream. I want to thank you for joining me
That's
today.
why thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Right. And I wish you best of luck with the screenplay, with the new publisher, with everything that's going on. And please stay safe.
Thank you. You too. Thank you very much.
Over the river to the city.